Ethan had never imagined his life would take such a strange turn. As a young Earth diplomat, he had been sent to a far-off star system to represent his home planet, but what awaited him there was something he couldn't have prepared for. The alien planet, Regina, was known for its beauty and its two ruling factions, each led by a powerful princess. Both princesses were revered as leaders and warriors, each ruling their people with a firm grip. But when Ethan met them, he felt nothing like what he had expected. His arrival was met with formalities, of course. Relana, the princess of the Northern Kingdom, was tall with shimmering silver skin and golden eyes. She was confident and commanding, her beauty matching her intelligence. She greeted him with grace, but there was something in her eyes, curiosity, or maybe something deeper, that made Ethan feel both nervous and intrigued. Silara, the princess of the Southern Kingdom, was the opposite in many ways. Her skin was a pale, shimmering violet, and her eyes held a gentle warmth that made Ethan feel at ease in her presence. She was soft-spoken but carried an air of wisdom that made it clear she was not to be underestimated. When their eyes met, Ethan noticed how different they were, yet how both were equally captivating. The tension was immediate. The princesses had been raised to rule different factions of the same empire, and although they were sisters by blood, their allegiances were often at odds. Their kingdoms had been in conflict for centuries, and the fact that they were both interested in this human diplomat only complicated things further. During their first meeting, Ethan could sense an unspoken competition between the two women. Rylana's sharp words and confident posture were in stark contrast to Silara's quieter, almost introspective manner. Yet both princesses were clearly intrigued by Ethan, each seeing something in him that was both foreign and fascinating. They had never interacted with humans before, and something about him stirred emotions in both of them that they couldn't quite explain. As the formal introductions ended and the evening drew on, Ethan found himself walking alongside Rylana and Silara, both of them eyeing him with interest. He couldn't help but feel like a pawn in their world of politics and power, but something in their presence made him want to stay. They were different from anyone he had ever met, elegant, powerful, yet undeniably human in the way they seemed to wrestle with their own emotions. By the end of the night, Ethan had learned more about Regina's history than he ever expected. But he had also learned that the two princesses were more than just rulers. They were women who carried the weight of their people's futures on their shoulders. And despite their differences, there was an undeniable spark between them and the human who had unknowingly entered their world. As the meeting concluded and Ethan was escorted back to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter had only just begun. His mission here had taken an unexpected turn, and he was now caught in the middle of a rivalry that might change everything. The next few days on Regina were filled with meetings, discussions, and plans for Earth's future involvement with the planet. Ethan found himself spending more time with the two princesses. He was expected to help negotiate a treaty between their kingdoms, but what seemed like a simple task quickly became far more complicated. As he got to know Rylana and Silara better, he realized that their relationship was far from harmonious. Rylana, the princess of the Northern Kingdom, was strong-willed and fierce. She had a commanding presence, her every word carrying authority. She ruled her people with an iron fist, and it was clear she wasn't accustomed to being questioned. Ethan admired her confidence, but at times her intensity made him feel like he was walking on eggshells around her. Silara, the princess of the Southern Kingdom, was different. She was calm and thoughtful, her voice soft but filled with wisdom. Unlike Rylana, she ruled with empathy and understanding, always seeking peaceful solutions. She was the kind of leader who believed in diplomacy first, and she often tried to mediate between her people and her sister's kingdom. But despite her gentle nature, Ethan noticed a quiet strength in her that made her just as formidable as Rylana. It didn't take long for Ethan to notice the tension between the two. Although they were sisters, their kingdoms had been at odds for centuries, and their personal rivalry was just as intense as the political one. In their shared moments with Ethan, there was an undercurrent of competition that neither could hide. Rhaelana would often challenge Solara's ideas, questioning her peaceful approach and pushing for more aggressive tactics. Solara, in turn, would gently challenge Rhaelana's harsh methods, offering alternative solutions that focused on negotiation and compromise. Ethan felt trapped between them, unsure of how to navigate their competing desires. He was supposed to be neutral, helping both factions work together, but the princesses seemed determined to make him a part of their struggle. Each time he interacted with one of them, the other would seem distant, almost jealous. They both made it clear, in their own ways, that they wanted his attention and approval. Ethan couldn't help but feel drawn to both of them, but he also knew that getting too close to either princess could create even more tension. One evening, after a long day of discussions, Ethan found himself alone with Solara. She had invited him to walk through the palace gardens, away from the political pressures that had been building between them. The quiet beauty of the gardens, with their glowing plants and soft, cool air, was a welcome change from the tense atmosphere inside the palace. As they walked together, Solara spoke more freely than she had before. "I know my sister can be overwhelming at times," she said softly. "She believes in strength above all else. But there is another way, Ethan. I believe peace is possible if we are patient enough to find it." Ethan nodded, feeling a deep sense of admiration for Solara. But as he spoke, he couldn't help but wonder if Rhaelana would ever agree to her sister's vision. "And what about your sister?" he asked carefully. "What if she doesn't want peace?" Solara paused, her eyes distant. "Then we will fight, but I would rather find a way to avoid that." There was a quiet sadness in her voice, and Ethan could see how much the rivalry between her and Rhaelana weighed on her heart. As the night wore on, Ethan realized that he was caught in the middle of something much larger than himself. The love and loyalty the two princesses felt for their people, mixed with their growing feelings for him, had created a delicate web of emotions that he wasn't sure he could untangle. The tension was growing stronger each day, and Ethan knew he would have to choose soon, whether to play the diplomat or to take a side in a battle neither princess was fully ready to face. The next day, as he walked into the council chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was only just beginning. As the days went by, Ethan found himself growing more and more attached to both princesses. The political talks had become more intense, but something else was happening beneath the surface. Rhaelana and Solara were no longer just the rulers of their kingdoms. They had become two very different women with lives of their own. And they were both falling for him in ways neither could deny. It was a quiet evening when Ethan first felt the pull between the two women more strongly than ever. He had just finished a meeting with Rhaelana about the growing tensions between their people. She had been as passionate and fierce as always, but there had been something else in her eyes that night, something softer. As the meeting ended, she asked him to stay. "Ethan," she said, her voice unusually gentle, "I know you are trying to help, but sometimes it feels like you don't fully understand the weight of what's happening here." Ethan looked at her, sensing the deep sadness in her words. "I'm trying," he said honestly, "but I don't have the experience you do. I can't pretend to know what it's like to lead a whole kingdom." Rhaelana sighed, her sharp features softening. "You don't need to understand everything. Just be with us. Be part of this world. It's what I need right now." The way she said it left Ethan speechless. For a moment, he wondered if she meant something more than just political support. But before he could ask, Solara entered the room, her calm presence immediately drawing Ethan's attention. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Solara said with a soft smile. "But I was hoping you could join me for a walk, Ethan. The garden is beautiful at night." Rhaelana glanced at Solara, her expression hardening just slightly. Ethan noticed the shift and felt a sudden wave of tension between the two women. It was clear that there was more to their rivalry than just politics. It had become something much more personal. "Of course," Ethan replied to Solara, trying to ease the tension. He turned to Rhaelana, offering a small smile. "I'll be back soon." Rhaelana nodded, but there was something in her eyes that told Ethan she was not happy about the invitation. As he walked with Solara into the garden, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a dangerous line. Both women seemed to want him, but neither could know about the growing connection he was feeling for the other. In the quiet, moonlit garden, Solara's soft voice broke the silence. "Raylana means well," she said, her words careful, "but her approach is often difficult. She believes that strength and power are everything. I know she's not used to thinking that peace could come from love." Ethan felt his heart racing. "I don't know if I can choose between you two," he admitted. "You both mean so much to me. But the way you both feel about each other, it's hard." Solara's gaze softened. "I understand," she whispered. "But there's more at play here than just our feelings. We are tied to our kingdoms, Ethan. We can't change what's expected of us." As they walked together under the stars, Ethan's mind swirled with confusion. He cared deeply for both women, but their worlds, so different, so full of power and responsibility, made it feel impossible for him to choose. He knew he couldn't stay neutral for much longer, not with both princesses pulling him in different directions. The deeper he fell for them, the more impossible his situation became, and Ethan had a feeling that the love between the two princesses would soon become the least of his worries. The real challenge was how to navigate the emotions that were building between them all. Would love truly be enough to unite them, or would it tear them apart? Ethan's heart was torn between the two princesses, and every moment he spent with either of them seemed to pull him deeper into the chaos of their emotions. He had come to Regina to help broker peace between two rival kingdoms, but now peace seemed far away. His feelings for Raylana and Solara had become a storm he wasn't sure how to weather. It all came to a head during a crucial meeting. The tension in the room was thick, as both princesses sat on opposite sides of the long table, their gazes not meeting but always aware of each other's presence. The negotiations had reached a critical point. Decisions would be made about how their two kingdoms would share resources, their borders, and most importantly, how they would live in harmony or continue their long-standing conflict. Ethan had always been a mediator, skilled at finding common ground, but today, even his calm demeanor couldn't keep the peace between the sisters. Raylana's sharp voice cut through the silence. "We will never be weak," she declared, her eyes flashing with intensity. "My people will not bow to diplomacy. Strength is what will keep our people alive, not endless talk." Solara's soft voice contrasted sharply with her sister's. "But we cannot live forever in conflict," she said. "We need to find a way to trust each other, to work together. Only then can we secure peace for everyone." Ethan watched the two of them, his heart heavy. He knew both princesses were right in their own ways, but their approach to the situation seemed worlds apart. The more he listened, the more he realized that it wasn't just their kingdoms that were divided, it was their hearts. And in a way, his own heart had become a battlefield between them. As the meeting progressed, Ethan found himself caught in the crossfire of their growing rivalry. He tried to keep the discussion civil, but it was impossible to ignore the personal tension that had taken root. The undercurrent of competition between the princesses had shifted to something more dangerous: resentment. Every glance, every word exchanged between them carried the weight of their unspoken feelings, and Ethan could no longer ignore it. Later that evening, after the meeting had ended, Ethan was left alone in the palace courtyard. He needed space to think, to clear his mind. The garden had always been a place of peace, but tonight it felt like the quiet before a storm. He hadn't been outside long when he saw Raylana approaching. Her face was hard, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. She stopped just a few feet away from him, her gaze unwavering. "Ethan," she said, her voice low and strained, "you can't keep trying to make both sides happy. One of us will always be disappointed." She looked away for a moment, her breath shaky. "I know you care for us both, but it can't go on." Ethan's chest tightened. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Raylana, but I can't just choose. I don't know how to." Her eyes softened for a moment before hardening again. "You're going to have to, sooner or later." She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there, his thoughts a whirlwind. He felt torn between the two women. R'ellana's fire and strength were impossible to ignore, but Solara's gentleness and wisdom made him feel at home in a way he hadn't expected. The love he felt for both of them was real, but in the end, he knew that only one of them could be his future. Ethan walked back to his quarters that night, feeling heavier than ever. The next steps would be crucial, not just for the kingdoms of Regina, but for his heart. He knew that the choices he made now could shape the future for all of them. And deep down, Ethan wondered if love could truly conquer the divide between two sisters, or if it would be the thing that destroyed them all. The days following R'ellana's words were filled with tension. Ethan could feel the weight of her warning on his shoulders, and he couldn't escape the truth in her eyes. He was at a crossroads, torn between the two women, each with her own vision for the future. But more than anything, he felt the pressure of being the one to decide their fate, without knowing if his heart would ever be able to choose. Solara had been more quiet than usual, her soft demeanor almost becoming a mystery. Whenever they spoke, there was a certain sadness in her gaze, like she knew that Ethan's heart was divided. She was the one who had always been gentle, the one who had wanted peace between the kingdoms, but even she couldn't ignore the mounting tension between herself and her sister. And neither of them could ignore the man who stood between them. One evening, after a long day of talks, Ethan found himself in the palace's garden once again, hoping for a moment of clarity. The cool air helped calm his racing mind, but it didn't take long before he felt a presence behind him. "Ethan," a familiar voice said softly. It was R'ellana. Turning to face her, Ethan could see the fire in her eyes had not dimmed. She was still the powerful leader, the woman who commanded respect, but there was something different in the way she stood before him now. It was as if her walls had come down, leaving her vulnerable in a way that Ethan had never seen before. "I need to know where you stand," R'ellana said, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. If you don't choose, you'll force me to make a choice for both of us." Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had always tried to stay neutral, to understand both sides, but it was becoming clear that neutrality was no longer an option. Both princesses had reached out to him in different ways, both with their own needs, and he was caught in a storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. "I care for you, R'ellana," Ethan said, his voice sincere. "But I care for Solara too. I don't want to hurt either of you." R'ellana's expression softened, but there was still a hardness to her eyes. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "Solara is the one who will do what's best for her people. She will give in, bend to whatever will bring peace, even if it means sacrificing herself. But I won't. I won't bend, and I don't want to be the one who loses you to her." Her words hit Ethan like a blow. He had always known that R'ellana was strong, but the depth of her feelings for him was clearer than ever. She wasn't just fighting for her people anymore. She was fighting for him. And in that moment, Ethan realized the depth of the responsibility that lay on his shoulders. Before he could say anything, a soft voice interrupted them. "You don't have to choose," Solara said, stepping into view. She had been watching from a distance, her face calm, but with a glimmer of sadness in her eyes. "You never had to choose, Ethan." Ethan's heart sank. He had feared this moment, the moment when they would both realize that his love was not enough to heal the rift between them. He turned to face Solara, his mind in turmoil. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I wish I could make it easy for all of us." Solara walked toward him, her expression soft and understanding. "You don't have to. Love isn't always easy, but sometimes the right choice isn't about who you love more. It's about the future you want to create." Her words echoed in Ethan's mind, but before he could respond, R'ellana stepped forward as well. The three of them stood together in the garden, a triangle of emotions, love, and uncertainty. Ethan realized that they were all bound by something stronger than just their hearts. It was a future they all hoped to shape together. But as he looked at both princesses, Ethan knew that the moment of choice was coming. and with it, everything would change. The tension that had been building between Ethan, R'hllana, and Solara finally reached a breaking point. The weight of their unspoken feelings, the complex dynamics of their three-way connection, and the looming pressure of peace talks had taken its toll on all of them. No longer could they pretend that everything would work itself out on its own. It was late afternoon when the storm hit. Ethan had been called to a final meeting with both princesses. The discussions about peace were supposed to be the main focus, but everyone knew that there was something far more important on the table now: their hearts. Ethan arrived at the meeting hall early, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and indecision. He had hoped for clarity, but all he felt now was the weight of his choices pressing in on him from every direction. R'hllana had been fierce and determined, unwilling to let go of her beliefs about strength and power. Solara, on the other hand, had been quiet, patient, and understanding, but there was a sadness in her eyes now that he couldn't ignore. The two princesses entered the room at the same time, their expressions sharp. Neither of them greeted him with the warmth that had once been present between them. R'hllana's gaze was hard, her jaw set in determination. Solara, though still gentle, seemed distant, as if she had already made up her mind about something. "Ethan," R'hllana said, her voice firm, "we need to talk about the future, about where we stand." Ethan nodded, trying to steady his nerves. He had known this conversation was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. "I understand," he said quietly, glancing between them both. "We all need to make a choice." Solara's eyes flickered with sadness, but she spoke calmly. "We've been at war for so long, but now I see that it's not just about kingdoms. It's about us, and what we're willing to sacrifice for peace." R'hllana's gaze hardened. "I will not give up what is mine for the sake of peace. Not now, not ever. And if you believe that, then we are on different paths." Ethan felt his heart race. He had always known that R'hllana's strength would be a force to reckon with, but hearing her so resolute, so unwilling to bend, struck a chord deep inside him. He had hoped for a way to bring both women together, to find a solution where they could work as allies, but it was becoming clear that such a dream would never be realized. At least, not without a price. "I never asked you to give up everything," Solara said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I just wanted to find a way to bring us all together. But maybe this is too much." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He had wanted to believe that love could overcome all obstacles, but now it seemed that the divide between R'hllana and Solara was too deep to bridge. He could feel it in the air. Their connection, once strong, was now fractured beyond repair. "I don't know what to do," Ethan admitted, his voice barely audible. He felt the tears in his eyes, but he fought to hold them back. "I don't want to lose either of you." R'hllana stepped forward, her expression fierce. "You're not going to lose me, but you have to make a choice, me or her." Solara took a deep breath and stepped back, her heart heavy with understanding. "It's always been about choosing. But the question is, which future do you want, Ethan?" The room fell silent, the weight of their words pressing in on him like a vice. In that moment, Ethan realized that he could no longer pretend to be the neutral mediator. His heart had been caught up in this battle, and the time for indecision had passed. The future of not just the kingdoms, but his own heart, depended on what he would decide now. As R'hllana and Solara waited for him to answer, Ethan knew that whatever choice he made, there would be no turning back. Ethan stood at the crossroads of his life, each path stretching before him, each one leading to a different future. His heart was heavy with the weight of the decision he had to make. R'hllana and Solara waited, their eyes fixed on him, each filled with hope and fear in equal measure. R'hllana's voice had been sharp, demanding, but there was vulnerability behind her fierce eyes. She didn't want to lose him. Solara, on the other hand, was gentle, her quiet strength evident in the way she had always sought peace, but there was sadness in her gaze now, a quiet acceptance that their paths might not align. "Ethan," Rylana's voice broke through his thoughts. You can't keep putting this off. We're at war, but we're also at war with ourselves. I know you feel it too. Her voice softened, and her gaze softened as well. I won't beg you. I won't change for anyone, but I'll be loyal to you, and I'll fight for us. Solara stepped forward, her expression gentle but firm. And I'll always stand by you, Ethan. But I want more than just fighting. I want something that lasts, something built on trust and love. I want us to heal, not just survive. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. I know this isn't easy, but you have to choose what kind of future you want. One built on fire and force, or one built on compassion and understanding. Ethan's mind was spinning. Both women were beautiful, both were strong, and both had a piece of his heart. Rylana's fire, her strength, had always drawn him in. She was a force, and he admired that about her. But Solara's warmth, her kindness, her ability to see the good in even the darkest situations, had pulled him in too. The future of their kingdoms was in his hands now. But even more than that, the future of the love they all shared depended on his decision. And that made the choice even harder. He glanced at Solara, whose soft eyes met his with understanding. She knew what he was thinking. She knew the weight of the choice. Then his eyes moved to Rylana, whose face was set in determination, waiting for him to make a decision. Rylana stepped closer to him, her hand reaching out, but he took a step back. Don't rush me, he said quietly, his voice hoarse. I need time. I can't just choose right now. It's not that simple. Rylana's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She had expected this response, even though it stung to hear. Solara, however, gave a small nod, a sad smile pulling at the corners of her lips. It's okay, she said softly. You don't have to rush, but don't take too long. The future is already changing, and I don't want to wait forever. Ethan turned his gaze to the horizon outside the palace windows. The world outside was quiet, peaceful even. But inside, the storm raged. He had always thought love was something that could fix everything, that it would somehow solve all the problems that plagued their world. But now, he wasn't so sure. For the first time, he realized that love wasn't a simple solution. Love wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about finding balance. And in that moment, he knew that whatever choice he made, he would have to live with it. With a deep breath, Ethan turned back to face the two women. I don't know what the future holds, he said slowly, his voice filled with emotion. But I know that I want to try. The silence in the room was thick as everyone waited for what he would say next. Ethan didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, he felt like he was ready to take the next step, no matter what it would mean for him, Rylana, and Solara. Ethan's heart pounded as the weight of his words settled in the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Rylana stood, her eyes cold but unreadable, while Solara's expression softened, a hint of relief visible in her gaze. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. He had made his choice. But that choice didn't come with simple answers. It wasn't just about picking one woman over the other. It was about the future they would build together. Or perhaps the future they might not. I can't choose between you two, Ethan finally said, his voice steady but full of emotion. Rylana, you've shown me strength. Your fire, your power is unmatched, and I admire you more than you know. But Solara, you've shown me something else, something I didn't realize I needed. Kindness, patience, peace. Rylana's lips curled into a small, bitter smile. So what are you saying? She asked, her voice sharp. That you want both of us to live in some kind of balance. Her tone held both disbelief and anger. You can't have it both ways, Ethan. You have to pick a side. Solara gently placed her hand on Rylana's arm, her touch soft, trying to calm the tension that crackled in the air. Let him speak, she said, her voice soothing, but it held an edge of sadness. He's trying to find a way forward. We owe him that. Ethan nodded, grateful for Solara's understanding, but Rylana's words stung. He knew she was right in some ways. It was impossible to please everyone. Someone would get hurt, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase that truth. "I'm not asking you to change for me," Ethan said, looking directly at Rilana. "But I want to find a way to bring the best parts of both of you together. The strength and fire that you have, Rilana, and the compassion, the peace that Solara brings. Maybe it's not about choosing. Maybe it's about creating something new, together." Rilana's expression softened slightly, but she remained cautious, unsure if she could trust the idea of change. "You think we can just change everything?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "You think we can just forget our differences and live in peace? Do you even know how many battles I've fought to keep my people safe? Do you think I can just forget that for some dream of balance?" "I'm not asking you to forget," Ethan said, his voice firm. "But I am asking you to try, to see the value in what Solara brings. We don't have to fight anymore. There's a way to end the war, a way to bring our people together." Solara stepped forward, her soft eyes filled with hope. "We can make this work, Rilana," she said, "not by ignoring the past, but by understanding it, by learning from it. There's no perfect solution, but we can find a way forward. We just have to trust each other." Rilana's eyes flickered between the two of them, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she was silent, as if considering every word that had been spoken. The tension in the room was thick, but there was also something else, something fragile, something that held the possibility of hope. "I don't know if I can trust this," Rilana finally said, her voice low, almost resigned. "But I'll try. For now, we'll try." Ethan's heart lifted at her words. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The future wasn't certain. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone in this. They weren't alone. They had each other, and perhaps that was enough to start building something better. As the three of them stood there, facing the unknown together, they realized that the path forward would require more than just strength or compassion. It would take trust, patience, and the willingness to fight, not just for peace, but for each other. The days that followed were filled with challenges, but also with hope. Ethan, Rilana, and Solara had agreed to try, but the path was never as simple as they imagined. They had all come from different worlds, shaped by years of conflict and distrust. Now they were standing at the edge of something new, something unknown. Rilana's fire was still strong, her impatience often clashing with Solara's calm approach. But there was something different now. Rilana didn't push away Solara's ideas as much, and Solara, in turn, had begun to understand Rilana's fierce desire to protect her people. They were learning, slowly, that their differences didn't have to drive them apart. Ethan had become the bridge between them, the one who held them together. But even he knew that the weight of their worlds couldn't rest on his shoulders alone. He wasn't just trying to bring peace between two alien princesses. He was trying to unite entire civilizations that had been at war for generations. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, the three of them sat together on a balcony, looking out over the vast landscape. The air was warm, carrying the scent of the distant flowers from Solara's planet. There was something peaceful about this moment, something that felt like the calm before a storm, or perhaps the calm after one. "I've been thinking," Rilana said, her voice quiet, "about what you said, Ethan. About not choosing sides, but finding a way to balance the best of both our worlds." Ethan looked at her, waiting for her to continue. He had learned that patience was key with Rilana. When she spoke, it was always with purpose. "I still don't think it's going to be easy," she continued. "There are too many people who won't understand. Too many who will fight us every step of the way. But maybe you're right. Maybe there's a chance. A small one, but a chance." Solara smiled softly, her gentle expression warm under the fading sunlight. "It's not about perfection, Rilana. It's about trying. We've already made more progress than I ever thought possible." Ethan nodded in agreement. "We've taken the first step. Now we have to keep moving forward. There will be obstacles, but we'll face them together, and we'll make it through. For the first time, the tension between Raylana and Silara seemed to ease. They weren't perfect, but they were learning to work together. They were becoming allies, not just for Ithan's sake, but for the future of their people. It wasn't going to be easy, but they were all ready to fight for it. As night began to fall, the stars started to shine, and for the first time in a long time, the three of them didn't feel so alone. There was hope in the air, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, they were on the right path. And in that quiet moment, as the future stretched out before them, they all realized something important. Peace wasn't just about the end of conflict. It was about understanding, about learning to live together despite differences, about finding the strength in each other. It was about love. Ithan looked at the two women beside him, his heart full of both pride and uncertainty. But he knew one thing for sure. They were all in this together. And that was enough for now. The stars above twinkled brightly, casting their light over the three of them, as the first steps of a new beginning began.